On my retirement day, my boss handed me only $50 as my pension, saying, "As per the contract, Thai is your pension. Now pack up and leave." I was shocked but kept my composure and did as he said. I took my laptop and changed the codes of the entire car tracking system I had developed. The next day he called me 66 times, but that's exactly what my contract states: clean up, pack up, and leave behind a single dime sealed in an envelope. After 30 long years of dedication, the company I poured my life into owes me this meager pension. But Steven Tyler, the current president, young, smug, and the second-generation heir, mocked me as if my years of hard work meant nothing. His attitude left me feeling hollow and utterly disheartened. Any connection I once felt to this company had vanished. It had transformed into something unrecognizable, a corporation that no longer cared about its employees. I didn't argue. I simply nodded, took the packet he handed me, and replied, "Understood." Afterward, I headed straight to the systems management room. There, I erased all the data from the company's management system. You might think it was a cruel thing to do, but it was outlined in the contract as part of my responsibilities. Following the president's orders, I cleaned everything up as required. That was my final task. Moments later, chaos erupted in the office. "Hey, I can't send emails. What's going on?" someone exclaimed. "I can't access the internal system either," another voice joined in. The place buzzed with confusion and panic. Then, the president himself stormed toward me, pale and visibly shaken. "Steven, what's happening here? Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. I turned to face him calmly. That was the moment when my long-standing tension with the company's second-generation president truly began. "My name is Steven William. I'm 50 years old, and I've spent almost my entire life working for this organization. I joined right after high school, making me the longest-serving employee here. In an era where job hopping is common, my loyalty makes me somewhat of an anomaly. As the manager of systems management, my job has always been challenging, but I found it fulfilling. Over the years, my younger colleagues became more skilled, which meant I had less work to handle directly. Life felt good, and I was proud of what I had built. One of my most capable juniors, Samuel, approached me one day looking concerned. "Mr. William, I think there's a mistake here, but I'm not sure what's causing it," he said, pointing to his screen. I glanced over his shoulder. "Oh, this code isn't right. Here's how it should be," I explained, fixing the issue. Samuel beamed at me. "Thank you, Mr. William. I don't know what we do without you." I smiled back. "Soon enough, you'll be the one in charge of all this. I'm counting on you." Samuel laughed nervously. "I'm not ready for that yet." "What are you talking about?" "Well," I said, "I'll be 50 soon, so I've been thinking about how I'll spend my retirement." Samuel shook his head. "You've still got over a decade left, Mr. William. Why are you even talking about retiring?" Being in his 30s, Samuel didn't yet understand how quickly time flies. Still, I assured him, I plan to keep working hard until the day I leave. There's a lot I still want to accomplish before then. Back then, I felt satisfied with my life and proud of my career, but everything changed so suddenly. It started when Ethan Tyler, the company's founder and president, fell ill and had to be hospitalized. His condition worsened unexpectedly, leaving no hope for recovery. In his absence, his only son, Steven, swiftly took over as president. Steven wasted no time delivering an emotional inaugural speech. "This situation has shocked us all, but it's time to unite and move forward. Together we'll bring about the changes this company needs to thrive," he declared, his enthusiasm almost contagious. At first, his words lifted everyone's spirits. Steven had an undeniable charisma that made people believe in him. I'd known him briefly during his stint at a subsidiary, and I truly believed he could carry on his father's legacy. But my optimism didn't last. Not long after stepping into his role, Steven began focusing on efficiency and cost-cutting. His sweeping changes included sudden reorganizations, staff layoffs, and transfers that disrupted the entire office. Chaos quickly followed, but the most heartbreaking part of his leadership was how he treated the company's senior, long-serving employees. Instead of valuing their experience, he saw them as obstacles to younger workers' growth. Rather than firing them outright, he demoted them to lower roles with significant pay cuts. For instance, skilled salespeople were reassigned to desk jobs, while support staff who struggled in these new positions eventually quit out of frustration. Meanwhile, younger employees were promoted at lightning speed, often without the necessary skills or experience to justify it. At first, I tried to make sense of it. If the younger workers were genuinely talented, I might have understood, but the truth was, their performance reviews didn't reflect their capabilities. The company's talented young workers, disillusioned by the favoritism, left in droves. Those who stayed were mostly the president's loyal sycophants, benefiting from undeserved perks. Today, yet another trusted colleague of mine announced they were leaving. The team I had worked with for decades was falling apart, one resignation at a time. He was one of our top salespeople, someone who consistently boosted the company's revenue. As he packed up to leave, he smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for everything, Stephen." I forced a smile, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But why are you leaving? You're so good at what you do." He let out a heavy sigh and replied, "I'm just tired of giving my all to this place. It doesn't feel worth it anymore." Then he looked at me and added, "But Stephen, you're the backbone of this company. No one else can manage the systems like you do. Hang in there." As he grinned, probably trying to lighten the mood, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I tried to smile back, but my heart ached. I should have been waving him off with a cheerful farewell, but all I could do was watch him leave, his back disappearing into the distance. How many times had I seen colleagues, friends, walk away like this? You'd think a mass exodus like this would spark a rebellion, but nothing ever happened. One by one, talented employees left, leaving behind only those who were overworked, resigned to their fates, or loyal to President Stephen. I was one of the determined ones, still clinging to the company I had once loved. But it was clear the company was on a downward spiral. The signs of decline were everywhere, and even President Stephen seemed increasingly uneasy. "This is just a temporary setback," I overheard him telling his supporters one day. "It's like crouching before a big leap forward. We'll bounce back soon." I couldn't believe the arrogance in his words, especially when those around him blindly echoed, as expected from the president. It was obvious he wasn't willing to admit his mistakes. Frustrated, I returned to the system management room, where Samuel was waiting for me. "Mr. William, there's big news," Samuel said excitedly. "The president is coming to inspect the system management room today." "What?" That's surprised? Word is, after all the personnel changes, he's now looking to cut costs in our department. He might even target the systems themselves. I sighed, trying to hide my unease. "There's not much we can do, Samuel. President Stephen has a habit of making cuts in critical areas. It's good he's enthusiastic, but his priorities are all wrong." Not long after, President Stephen arrived. He entered the room, his eyes scanning everything as though he were trying to figure out what we actually did here. "Isn't the air conditioning too high?" he asked suddenly. "Heating and cooling costs are significant, you know." I answered calmly, "Computers are sensitive to heat, so this temperature is necessary for management purposes?" He gave a half-hearted nod but seemed uninterested in my explanation. Ignoring me, he turned his attention to Samuel and started asking him questions. For some reason, he completely overlooked the fact that I was the manager. After wandering around the room for a while, he finally turned to me. "Stephen, right?" "Yes, Mr. President," I replied, surprised he even remembered my name. "How long have you been working here?" 30 years, I answered. 30 years, that's quite a long time, he said, his tone overly casual, almost dismissive. It grated on me, but I kept my composure. He continued, "I noticed your base salary is rather high. Was that part of your original employment terms?" "Yes, it was," I replied firmly. "Well, Samuel here is managing the system now too, isn't he?" "Technically yes," I said, though his comment unsettled me. This was my first one-on-one conversation with the president, and despite my reservations, I decided to offer some advice. "Mr. President, I strongly recommend not replacing the current system. With all the personnel changes recently, many employees are still adjusting to their new roles. Switching systems now would only reduce efficiency further." President Stephen raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. Before I could explain further, he cut me off. "That's for me to decide," he snapped. I fell silent. His sudden harshness was unexpected. I'd never seen him look at anyone like that before, cold and condescending. "A worker like you challenging the president's decisions?" he sneered. "You need to remember your place." "I'm sorry," I muttered, feeling a mix of anger and frustration. He smirked and added, "You're the manager, right, Stephen? Don't worry, I'll think about this thoroughly, just like I do with the system." His tone was dripping with sarcasm as he walked out. Samuel, who had been watching the whole exchange nervously, let out a sigh of relief once the president was gone. "That was intense, Mr. William. You're incredible." I shook my head. "I'm sorry, Samuel. I didn't mean to create such an awkward situation." "No. It's okay," he said quickly. "Honestly, your viewpoint makes a lot of sense. But the president, he's incredibly frustrating. What's going through his mind?" "Probably nothing good," I said with a scowl. Samuel and I sat quietly for a moment, both deep in thought. After that day, we decided to have an honest conversation about our future plans. It seemed like the best course of action, considering the company's current state. A month later, I was summoned to the president's office. When I arrived, President Stephen greeted me with a forced smile. "Stephen, thank you for all your hard work over the years," he began. I nodded politely, unsure of where this was going. Then he dropped the bombshell. "We've decided to let you go." I stared at him in disbelief. "What did you just say?" "It's not personal," he said with a grin. "It's strictly business?" He handed me a small packet, adding, "This is your pension." The envelope he gave me looked cheap, and something about it felt wrong. Why wasn't the payment done via a bank transfer? Still in shock, I opened it to find a single coin inside, a dime. "Mr. President, this isn't funny. Not even as a joke," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Oh, it's no joke," he replied coolly. He pulled out a document and placed it on the desk in front of me. "Take a look at this." I recognized the paper immediately. It was the employment contract I had signed 30 years ago when I first joined the company. President Stephen tapped a specific section of my old employment contract with his finger. "Look here," he said smugly. "Your employer pension is listed as 10? My eyes widened in shock. Next to the section about the employer pension, which originally just stated pension provided, someone had scribbled in 10 with a ballpoint pen. The writing was unmistakably different from the printed text. President Stephen grinned triumphantly as he traced over the handwritten words. "See? I didn't write this. It was already there. Amusing, isn't it? But you signed and stamped this contract, didn't you?" I opened my mouth to object, but he cut me off before I could say a word. "This is all by the book," he said firmly. "Clean up and leave, just as stated in the contract." His expression made it clear that any argument would be pointless. I realized I had probably been on his radar for some time now. I was the kind of long-serving employee he wanted to push out, someone who represented the old guard he despised. The only reason I hadn't been targeted earlier was my control over the company systems. But after his last visit to the system management room, he must have decided that Samuel was capable enough to take over. It didn't help that my honest advice during that visit had likely rubbed him the wrong way. What a petty and narrow-minded man, I thought. A company led by someone like him had no future. As I left his office, the faces of my colleagues who had been forced out before me came to mind. Their frustration, their sadness, it all made sense now. I forced a smile. "Understood," I said, then walked out, stuffing the flimsy envelope into my pocket. My next stop was the system management room. Samuel was waiting for me there, just as we had planned. "It's time, Samuel," I said calmly. Samuel nodded, his face serious. "I'm ready." We sat down at our computers and got to work. Dismantling a system is much easier than building one, and we had everything erased in no time. Soon, the office erupted into chaos. I could hear panicked voices through the walls. "Hey, I can't send emails. The internal system isn't working. What's happening?" The confusion was spreading quickly. I cracked the door open just enough to peek outside. People were running around, completely lost, unable to figure out what to do. It wasn't long before President Stephen showed up, pale and frantic. "Stephen," he yelled, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. "What did you do?" I turned to face him, calm and composed. "I did exactly what you asked, Mr. President," I said. "What do you mean, your personal belongings? Why did you delete the system?" I replied, "Well, since the system belonged to me, I removed it. I was just tidying up what I had contributed to the company." "What are you talking about?" he asked, looking more confused than ever. I pulled out the same contract he had been so eager to show me earlier. "It's all here," I said, pointing to a specific clause. "This system wasn't the company's property. My salary over the years covered its loan, and the agreement was that I would return it when I left. You should have this document on file. It's been part of the records for 30 years. President Stevens stared at the contract, clearly flustered. What is this nonsense? It's ridiculous that one employee leaving can bring down the entire system. I resisted the urge to fire back about how equally ridiculous it was to offer a pension worth a single dime. Instead, I kept my voice steady. "If you cancel my dismissal, I'll return both the system and your dime." He slammed the contract onto the desk. "Samuel, restore the system immediately," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. Samuel hesitated but quickly nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll get started right away, but it will take time. I don't care how long it takes. Just do it," President Stephen barked. As Samuel began the restoration process, I stood there quietly for a moment. Then, exchanging a glance with him, I decided it was time for me to leave. I walked out of the system management room, where I had spent so many years of my life, my mind buzzing with determination. This wasn't over. A few days later, I was at home, relaxing when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw the company's main number. I answered, and the first thing I heard was President Stephen's voice. "Stephen," he said, sounding exhausted. "We're in trouble. Samuel is struggling to restore the system, and nothing is working. We've already lost days of productivity, including the weekend." I could almost hear the desperation in his voice. It was a far cry from the smugness he'd shown me in his office. "So, what do you want me to do about it?" I asked, suppressing a laugh. Sell us the system. I'll pay you $100,000. No, $200,000. I couldn't help but laugh. President, you have no idea what that system is worth, do you? That's nothing. What do you mean nothing? Then how much do you want? $1 million, I said bluntly. 1 million. His voice cracked and I could almost picture the look on his face. Yes, 1 million, I said, keeping my tone steady. Even at that price you're getting a bargain. That system is worth far more. This is outrageous, he snapped. That's more than your entire pension, which as you'll recall was just 10, I replied dryly. Realizing he wasn't taking me seriously, I dropped the playful tone. President Stephen, I mean it. If you don't pay $1 million you won't get the system back, and I won't help Samuel restore it either. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke his tone was icy. Enough. I won't give in to your ridiculous demands. How dare you ask for such an outrageous sum, you ungrateful man, he shouted before hanging up. I put down the phone, feeling a mix of disappointment and resolve. It was clear that this man was unfit to lead the company. I picked up the phone again, ready to move forward with the next phase of my plan. The next day, loud shouting erupted from the president's office. The sound came from Stephen, now the former president, slamming his fist on the desk. Why am I being fired? He demanded, his voice shaking with outrage. Facing him was Ethan Tyler, his father. Though Ethan wasn't fully recovered from his illness, his presence was commanding. Watching him from the doorway, I couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. I'm not firing you, Ethan replied sternly. I'm demoting you to a regular employee. You need to start over and learn from the ground up. Stephen looked appalled. Me? A former president, working as an ordinary employee? How humiliating. Ethan slammed his hand on the desk, making Stephen flinch and stand upright. Humiliating, Ethan bellowed. You should be ashamed of the chaos you've caused. You nearly destroyed this company. I stood silently as Ethan unleashed his frustration. I was a fool to believe your reports, he continued. I warned you not to interfere with personnel decisions, yet you forced out so many trusted people, including Stephen. At the mention of my name, Stephen turned his glare toward me. He knew I had played a role in his downfall. His reckless actions had been intolerable, and I had taken steps to bring the situation to Ethan's attention. Feeling guilty for disturbing Ethan during his recovery, I had sent him a detailed report about what was happening under Stephen's leadership. Ethan, who had trusted Stephen's updates without question, was shocked when he read my account. Realizing the company was on the brink of collapse, he decided to return to the office, despite still needing treatment. When Ethan had said to me, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Stephen. My foolish son would have destroyed the company I built," I knew I had done the right thing. Samuel and I had carefully planned our actions. We knew that if things continued as they were, I would eventually be forced out too. So, we made the management system unusable, putting pressure on Stephen and his unresponsive supporters. It was the only form of resistance we could muster as the systems department. As expected, the chaos that followed the system shutdown was immense. Stephen couldn't handle the situation, and even his staunchest supporters began to lose faith in him. For the first time, the hardworking employees spoke up, "Resign, bring back President Ethan." The protests grew louder until Stephen was brought before the board. The criticism he faced was harsh but justified. The board called out his poor treatment of long-serving employees, his mishandling of layoffs, and the chaos caused by the system failure. During the meeting, the topic of my system came up. One board member said, "If we can purchase that system permanently for $1 million, it's a bargain. Why didn't the president buy it? Rebuilding it from scratch would cost far more in time and money." Hearing their appreciation for my work filled me with pride. All those years I had spent developing and maintaining the system had not been in vain. After the board's decision, Stephen was demoted. Back in the president's office, he sat across from Ethan, his head hung low. "I'm sorry," he said reluctantly, glancing at me. His apology was stiff, his dissatisfaction still visible. I kept my response simple. "Yeah." Ethan, observing the exchange, turned to me. "Stephen, I'm truly sorry for all the trouble. Will you consider coming back to the company?" He looked genuinely anxious, and his sincerity touched me. I smiled. "Yes, I'll come back, as long as you're the one in charge." "Thank you," Ethan said, relief evident in his voice. Then he asked, "Should we go ahead and pay the $1 million for the system?" "That won't be necessary," I replied. "You've already given me so much over the years." Ethan laughed and I joined in. Stephen, sitting off to the side, watched us with a puzzled expression. Later, back in the system management room, Samuel looked at me with admiration. "I'm glad everything worked out, Mr. William. I was so nervous about how it would all turn out." "You went through a lot too, Samuel," I said. "You even had to work over the weekend because of all this." Samuel shook his head with a smile. "If it means making the company a better place, I'd give up my weekends any time." Besides, all I really did was pretend I couldn't fix the system. I chuckled. Your acting was perfect. It was the key to resolving everything? Samuel nodded thoughtfully. Stephen was terrible though, offering you a 10 pension and even faking the contract. That's just unbelievable. I hesitated, then said, actually, there's something you should know. That handwritten 10 in the contract. I wrote it myself. Samuel's eyes widened. What do you mean? I smiled, sensing his curiosity. Let me tell you a story about my younger self and how I ended up here. It's something I've never shared with anyone before. Back in middle and high school, I was a loner. I couldn't fit in, and I struggled to communicate with others. Most of my time was spent alone in my room, tinkering with my computer. It became my world, my escape. I developed original source codes and built systems from scratch. One day, Ethan Tyler, a friend of my father's, heard about my work. He recognized my talent and offered me a job as a system manager at his company. For someone like me, who had been shut away for years, his belief in my abilities meant everything. Not only did he value my work, but he also offered me a salary far above what a high school graduate could typically expect. Ethan's faith in me gave me a chance to step into the world, and for that, I would always be grateful. I still remember the day Ethan offered me that unusually high salary. Even as a young man, I knew the amount he proposed was far more than I deserved. I can't accept this much, I told him honestly. But Ethan simply shook his head. This is still a modest offer, he replied. Our company is just getting started, and this is all we can afford right now. But as the company grows, we'll make sure to give you raises. Your system is that valuable. His words left me stunned. In a moment of impulsiveness and youthful innocence, I took the contract he handed me and scribbled something with a ballpoint pen. I wrote 10 next to the term, the employer pension. Ethan's eyes widened when he saw what I had written. 10? He asked, surprised. Yes, I said earnestly. I already feel bad accepting such a high salary every month. I don't want to take any extra money when I leave. This is my idea of fairness. Though he must have found my reasoning amusing, Ethan simply gave a gentle smile. Let's think of it this way, he said. We'll consider this system as a loan to the company. I'll include that in your work contract and prepare a formal document for it later. When you leave, you're free to take the system back, but if we need it, we'll buy it from you. Wouldn't that act as the employer pension? I nodded, realizing how clever the arrangement was. You noticed that right away, Ethan added, chuckling warmly. You're remarkably sharp. His laughter put me at ease, and at that moment, I decided I would follow Ethan's lead no matter what. He had seen something in me when I was at my lowest, and his faith pulled me out of my shell. When I finished recounting this story to Samuel, he let out a deep breath. So that's what happened between you and the president, he said, his voice filled with awe. Yeah, I replied. But I never imagined that contract would resurface because of Stephen. As for Stephen, he didn't last long at the company after his demotion. Unable to bear the idea of working as a regular employee, he resigned and started a business with a friend. However, Ethan later told me that Stephen's venture was struggling financially and didn't seem to be going well. Even after recovering and returning to full-time leadership, Ethan faced countless challenges. I could only hope Stephen wouldn't disrupt his father's work any further. I need to let him learn the hard way, Ethan said firmly one day. It's like a lion throwing its cub into the valley to teach it how to survive. I doubted Stephen would ever ask for help, even if he needed it. He had chosen to quit on his own, and he was too proud to admit defeat. With Ethan back in charge, the company slowly regained its energy and focus. Samuel and I worked tirelessly to make up for lost time, developing a new system that was more efficient and user-friendly. Things were starting to feel right again. One day, I received unexpected news during a visit to Ethan's office. What do you want me to do? I asked him, curious about the purpose of the meeting. Ethan leaned back in his chair and smiled. I want you to work as an executive, he said simply. I froze. An executive? Yes, he said, his tone serious yet kind. You're my right-hand man now. Eventually, I'd like you to become the executive vice president. I hope you'll agree to work alongside me as we rebuild this company. The weight of his words hit me hard. Executive vice president. The title itself carried immense responsibility. It meant overseeing the entire organization and standing as Ethan's closest advisor. Do you really think I'm suited for a role like this? I asked hesitantly. Ethan's gaze softened, as it always did when he sensed my doubts. The next generation is ready, aren't they? He said, referring to Samuel and the younger employees we had been mentoring. I nodded. Yes, I'm confident Samuel can handle it. There's no issue there. Then let's get started, Ethan said with a smile. We need to prepare for the shareholders' meeting and finalize your executive appointment contract. His use of the word contract made us both chuckle. Make sure you don't write 10 on this one, he teased. Oh, don't worry, I won't, I replied, laughing along with him. The warmth in the room was palpable, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of hope and belonging. As I left the president's office, a thought struck me. Could I, as an executive, help bring back some of my colleagues who had left in despair? The idea filled me with determination. I was grateful I had fought to defend this company, even when the odds were stacked against me. This company had given me a chance to step out of my isolated world and find happiness under the open sky. It had become more than just a workplace. It was a place that connected people, past, present, and future. As I walked back to my office, I felt the cool breeze of a new beginning. For the first time, I was moving forward, ready to embrace what lay ahead.